Have you ever felt like being kind all your life has only made you vulnerable? Like every time you offered patience, understanding, or forgiveness, someone took a little piece of your strength for granted? After 70, your body might not move as fast, but your mind has been shaped by decades of living, loving, and learning. This video isn't about turning cold in the cruel sense. It's not about shutting people out or building walls around your heart. It's about reclaiming something most people never realize they've lost: emotional independence. At this age, your energy is precious, your peace is sacred, and protecting it doesn't make you heartless, it makes you wise. Because peace doesn't come from pleasing others, it comes from knowing who you are, what you value, and what you no longer need to carry. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do for yourself is to stop explaining, stop overgiving, and start living with calm clarity. Let me share with you 6 life-changing reasons why learning to live coldly after 70 could be the greatest act of self-love. I speak not only as a doctor who's walked beside thousands of older adults, but as someone who's seen the burnout and the brilliance that comes when people finally choose peace over pressure. Stay with me. The final reason might just set you free. Reason number 1, emotional detachment preserves your inner peace. Far too many seniors carry the emotional weight of others long after their shoulders have grown weary. After a lifetime of being the fixer, the listener, the mediator, or the steady rock for family and friends, many find themselves emotionally depleted, not because they don't love deeply, but because they haven't learned the quiet power of emotional detachment. Let me be clear, emotional detachment is not apathy. It is not coldness or indifference. Rather, it is the conscious decision to protect your peace by choosing where, when, and how much emotional energy you give away. It's about honoring your own inner world instead of constantly being pulled into the turmoil of others. Take Robert, for instance, one of my longtime patients and now a dear friend. For over 30 years, Robert was the emotional glue that held his family together. Siblings arguing over inheritance, children quarreling about parenting styles, a wife who constantly leaned on him for emotional regulation. Robert was always there. He took the late-night phone calls, drove across town at the drop of a hat, and played therapist, judge, and referee more times than he could count. But behind closed doors, Robert was unraveling. His blood pressure climbed dangerously high, his sleep became fractured, and he rarely had time to do the simple things he loved: tending to his garden, reading under the oak tree, or walking in the early morning quiet. He was surrounded by people, yet lonelier than ever, because no one ever asked how he was doing. It wasn't until Robert suffered a minor heart episode that the truth sank in. His life was being consumed by problems that weren't his to fix. During recovery, we spoke often about boundaries, about permission, about reclaiming his time and energy. And slowly, Robert began to change. He started letting calls go to voicemail. He stopped rushing to solve everyone's crises. And most importantly, he learned that no is a full sentence, one that doesn't require guilt or justification. The transformation was quiet but profound. His health improved, his spirit lifted. He didn't become less loving, he became less available to be used. Robert's story isn't unique. I've seen it in countless older adults, especially those with deep empathy and decades of self-sacrifice behind them. They confuse compassion with obligation, thinking that to love someone means to carry their burdens indefinitely. But the truth is, love can still thrive at a distance. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do, for both yourself and others, is to step back. This is what emotional detachment is really about. It's not shutting down. It's not withdrawing completely. It's the art of staying grounded in your own emotional truth, even when others around you are in chaos. It's the wisdom of knowing that not every battle deserves your presence, and not every crisis requires your intervention. You don't have to attend every argument you're invited to. You don't have to absorb every tear, every complaint, every angry outburst from someone who hasn't learned to manage their own emotions. Your presence is sacred. Your peace is sacred. And in this season of life, you've earned the right to be selective with your energy. I've often said this to my patients: pick your emotional battles. That one sentence alone can shift the way you move through the world. When you're in your 60s, 70s, or 80s, Time is no longer an endless well. It is a precious gift. Every moment spent worrying about problems you didn't cause is a moment stone from the joy you could be experiencing. Imagine waking up each day not with the weight of others on your shoulders, but with lightness in your heart. Imagine spending your afternoons doing what you love, walking through the park, sipping tea with a good book, visiting a friend not because they're in crisis, but because you want to connect. That life is possible, but it begins with permission. Your permission to stop being everyone's emotional lifeline. You are not responsible for everyone's healing. You are not the emotional storage unit for others to dump their unresolved pain. You are a person with dreams, with needs, with limits, and honouring those limits is not selfish. It is a deep and necessary act of self-respect. In this chapter of your life, it's time to put peace at the centre. Not drama, not guilt, not old patterns of people-pleasing, just peace. So ask yourself honestly, who or what is robbing you of your calm? What relationships make you feel drained rather than nourished? What conversations leave you anxious rather than uplifted? Then, with grace and gentleness, start drawing that invisible line in the sand. Not to shut people out, but to keep your soul intact. Because you were never meant to fix everyone's storms. You were meant to savour your sunrise, and that sunrise, it's waiting. Reason number 2. The power of saying no without guilt. Saying no is one of the hardest things for older adults to do, especially for those who were raised during a time when politeness and self-sacrifice were considered the hallmarks of good character. Many were taught to smile, to comply, to go along with what others needed, often at the expense of their own well-being. But here's a truth that takes years to learn. Constantly saying yes to others often means you're constantly saying no to yourself. Let me tell you a story about Sandra, a woman who, like so many others of her generation, struggled with this very challenge. At 76, Sandra was a vibrant, loving grandmother. Her heart was enormous and her calendar was always full. She hosted family dinners, babysat her great-grandchildren, volunteered at church, cooked meals for neighbours, and lent an ear to anyone who needed it. She rarely took a day to rest, even when her knees ached and her back protested. Over time, Sandra's body began to speak louder than her words. She found herself in and out of the doctor's office, her energy dipping lower with each passing week. But even then, she kept saying yes. She believed it was her role to be available, to be kind, to be helpful. She thought that saying no would disappoint people or make her seem selfish. But the cost of that thinking was heavy. It was her health, it was her peace of mind. Then something remarkable happened. One Sunday, her niece asked her to watch the kids again for the 3rd time that week. Sandra took a deep breath and with a soft but steady voice said, "I love you, but no, I need to rest today." And just like that, the world didn't end. Her niece understood. The children found another sitter. Sandra sat in her favourite chair with a cup of tea and realised that the guilt she had feared didn't last. In fact, she felt free. Here's what I want you to know. Saying no doesn't mean you don't care. It doesn't mean you're abandoning anyone. It means you're finally choosing to care for yourself with the same tenderness you've offered others for decades. You've lived through wars, raised families, worked hard, and given more of yourself than most can understand. Now, in your golden years, your energy is precious. Your peace is sacred. You've earned the right to rest, to protect your time, and to nourish your soul. You've earned the right to say no without guilt. But how do we do that? How do we unlearn a lifetime of saying yes? Start small. You don't have to make grand declarations. Just begin by checking in with yourself before agreeing to anything. Ask, do I really want to do this? Do I have the energy for it? Will this bring me peace or drain me? Then practice saying no. You don't need to explain yourself in great detail. A simple, "I appreciate you thinking of me, but I won't be able to," is enough. You don't need to feel bad. In fact, you're modelling healthy boundaries for others, especially the younger generation who often struggle with the same issue. Remember this, saying no from a place of love is far more powerful than saying yes from a place of guilt. Think of it like tending a garden. If you give all your water away to every thirsty plant around you, your own flowers will wilt. But when you nourish yourself first, you'll have more to give, more joyfully, more sustainably. And if you're worried that people won't understand, Let them be surprised. Let them adjust. The people who truly care about you will want you to be well. They'll respect you more for standing up for yourself. And those who don't, perhaps they were more interested in what you could give than who you truly are. So here's my advice to you, dear reader. You don't owe everyone your time, your energy, or your constant availability. What you owe to yourself is compassion, rest, and the space to simply be. It's never too late to learn the gentle power of no. And sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself and others is to say it. Number 3, selective empathy is emotional wisdom. Empathy is one of the most beautiful traits a human being can possess. It allows us to connect deeply with others, to understand their struggles, and to offer compassion in times of pain. But like all beautiful things, empathy must be handled with care. Because while empathy can heal, constant and unfiltered empathy can quietly destroy you. There's a fine line between emotional connection and emotional entanglement, and learning to walk that line with wisdom is the hallmark of growing older with grace. Take Gerald, for example. At 83, Gerald was the kind of person everyone leaned on. He remembered every birthday, sent handwritten notes to his great-nieces, brought soup to neighbours with the flu, and always picked up the phone, even when it rang past midnight. He had a heart big enough for the world. But the cost? He didn't sleep. He had constant chest tightness and started losing weight. Anxiety gnawed at him from the moment he woke up. He wasn't just emotionally present for others, he was absorbing their pain as his own. One afternoon, after he'd been pacing back and forth telling me about his niece's divorce, his neighbour's surgery, and his friend's son losing his job, I gently said, "Gerald, you care too much." He looked up, startled. "Is that even possible?" "Yes," I said, "when it starts breaking you." I told him that just like we filter what we eat to protect our physical body, we must also filter what we feel to protect our emotional well-being. I asked him to practice something radical for him, selective empathy, choosing when and where to invest emotional energy rather than pouring himself out for every soul in distress. At first, he resisted. "But isn't that selfish?" he asked. "Not at all. It's emotional wisdom. Empathy without boundaries turns into burnout, and burnout leads to bitterness, exhaustion, and even health problems. As we age, we have less emotional energy to give away freely. That's not a weakness. It's nature's way of nudging us toward clarity, to focus only on what truly matters. 3 months after our talk, Gerald came back to me with a quiet glow in his eyes. "I feel 20 years younger," he said. "I still care, but I don't carry." He had stopped watching the news obsessively. He had gently pulled back from the chronic complainers in his life. He had learned to say, "I'm so sorry you're going through that," instead of, "Let me fix it for you." He even started meditating in the mornings, and for the first time in years he could sleep through the night. Here's the truth. You can be kind without collapsing. You can be compassionate without being consumed. You can listen without absorbing. You can love others without abandoning yourself. Selective empathy doesn't mean you stop caring, it means you stop drowning. You keep your emotional lifeboat afloat. So when someone truly needs your presence, you're strong enough to show up fully. Think of your heart like a house. Not everyone deserves a key to the front door. Some people can stand on the porch, some can stay for tea. A few close souls might be welcome to settle in the living room, but only you decide who comes in and how long they stay. That's not being cold. It's being conscious. So here's my advice, especially as we get older. Guard your heart like you guard your home. Don't attend every emotional fire you're invited to. Learn to say no with kindness and yes with discernment. Give yourself permission to rest even when others are in chaos. Not every crisis belongs to you. Let the world keep spinning. Let others live their lessons. Sometimes the most powerful form of love is to step back and let people grow through their own struggle. Empathy is a gift. But wisely given empathy, that is emotional mastery. And at this stage of life, we don't need to save everyone. We just need to stay well enough to keep loving for as long as we can. Number 4, guarding your time is guarding your dignity. Time after 70 is not just precious, it's sacred. It's not just about having fewer years ahead. It's about the quality of those years, the clarity, the peace, the power to choose what truly matters to you. By the time we reach 70, we've already given decades to others, raising families, building careers, caring for people, saying yes even when we meant no. Now, every moment is a chance to return home to ourselves. Let me tell you about Helen. Helen was always the reliable one. The one who showed up with cookies at church, answered every phone call, joined every club, and hosted every holiday dinner, whether she felt up to it or not. Her calendar was filled to the brim, but her spirit began to run dry. Her life looked full from the outside, but inside she felt hollow. Then, one chilly October morning, Helen sat by her kitchen window, watching the golden leaves drift down. She held her tea close and whispered aloud, "What brings me joy?" She waited in the silence for an answer, and when it came, it was quiet but clear. Not this. That moment changed everything. Helen started saying no, not out of bitterness, but out of deep respect for herself. She stopped going to social events that drained her. She gave up committees that no longer felt meaningful. She gently declined invitations that were more about obligation than joy. And in the space that opened up, she began painting again, something she hadn't done since her 20s. She took long walks alone and felt her thoughts breathe. She read novels that made her weep, not because she was sad, but because she was finally feeling again. Her dignity returned, not because others suddenly saw her differently, but because she began to honour her own time as something worthy of protection. Here's my advice from one soul to another. If your time isn't respected, neither is your worth. People who value you will also value your time, and those who try to guilt you for saying no, they were never truly honouring your presence. They were simply using your availability. There's a big difference. Your time is your life in moments. Guarding it is not selfish. It is sacred work. Saying no can be one of the most loving things you do for yourself and for others, because it means you are showing up where you want to be, not where you feel forced to be. I've met too many elders who run themselves ragged trying to please everyone. They attend events out of fear of loneliness or guilt. They agree to help even when their bones ache. They say yes because they don't want to disappoint, but in the process, they quietly abandon their own needs, their passions, their peace. And let's be honest, at this stage of life, peace is priceless. Guarding your time means carving out space to reflect, to rest, to enjoy the small things. Sunlight on your hands, a good cup of soup, a friend who really listens, music that reminds you of youth, prayers whispered into quiet nights. These aren't little things, these are the real things. So ask yourself often, does this nourish me? Does this align with who I am today? Is this a yes from my heart or just a habit? And when the answer is no, give yourself permission to step away with grace, not guilt. You've earned the right to live slowly, to live meaningfully, to live intentionally. Let go of the idea that productivity equals value. You are not here to prove anything anymore. You are here to be, to experience, to savor, to honor the journey that brought you here, and to shape the days that remain with wisdom, kindness, and authenticity. When you guard your time, you're not just protecting your schedule, you're protecting your dignity. You're declaring to the world and to yourself, I matter, my time matters, my peace matters. And that, dear friend, is a beautiful thing. Number 5, boundaries are shields, not walls. Many older adults confuse boundaries with rejection, isolation, or selfishness. But in truth, boundaries are not barriers to connection. They are bridges to self-respect. Setting boundaries isn't about pushing others away. It's about protecting your energy, your peace, and your values. And the older you get, the more sacred these become. We live in a culture where older adults, especially parents and grandparents, are often expected to give endlessly of their time, their resources, their emotional strength. It's almost as if aging comes with an unwritten rule that your needs must shrink so others can thrive. But here's a hard truth wrapped in kindness. Constantly giving while neglecting your own well-being doesn't make you noble. It makes you vulnerable to exhaustion, resentment, and even illness. Let me tell you about Louis. Louis is 81. For most of his life, he was the family rock, the go-to man. Need help moving? Call Louis. Need someone to watch the kids? Louis's on it. Need emotional support? Louis's always listening. Reliable, solid, but always drained. For decades, Louis confused love with availability. He believed saying yes was the way to prove he cared. But deep down, he was tired. He never had time for himself, his hobbies, his peace, his silence. He'd skip his morning walk to drive someone across town. He'd answer phone calls in the middle of his favourite TV show. He was giving pieces of himself away like loose change in his pocket. Then something shifted. One morning, Louis didn't answer the phone, not out of anger, not because he didn't care, but because he was sitting outside with a cup of coffee, watching the sunrise. That moment was his, and he chose to keep it. He started saying no more often, not in a cruel way, but in a clear and kind way. I'm not available right now. I need time for myself. I can't take that on. At first, some family members were surprised, a few were even frustrated. But slowly, something beautiful happened. Louis felt lighter, more present, more peaceful. For the first time in a long while, he felt like his life belonged to him again. Here's the wisdom Louis wants you to know. Freedom doesn't always come from doing less. It comes from choosing better. And choosing your peace is not selfish, it's wise. Setting boundaries is how you teach people how to treat you. If you're always available, always agreeable, always saying yes, people will assume that's your normal. But when you draw a line, when you say, this is where I end and this is what I need, you're not rejecting anyone. You're inviting them to meet the real you, the one with limits, the one with dignity. There's a big difference between a wall and a shield. A wall keeps people out. A shield protects you while you remain present. And boundaries are exactly that. Shields. They don't cut off love. They make space for healthier love, more respectful love, and above all, sustainable love. Here are some gentle ways you can start creating boundaries in your life. With your time. Schedule your rest the way you schedule errands. Protect it. Don't treat your time as if it's less valuable than anyone else's. With your emotions. You don't have to absorb everyone's stress, sadness, or drama. Listening is kind, but carrying it all is not your job. With your energy. If something drains you more than it fulfills you, give yourself permission to pause. Rest is not weakness, it's wisdom. With your phone, you don't need to pick up every call or reply immediately. Silence is sacred. It doesn't mean you don't care. It means you're human. Some people won't like your boundaries. That's okay. The ones who truly love you will understand, and the ones who don't, they were more attached to your service than your soul. Remember this, your worth is not measured by how much you do for others. It's measured by how well you care for yourself while still offering love to the world. Healthy boundaries are how you stay connected without losing yourself. So, my advice, from one soul to another, draw your line, speak your truth, stand by it. The right ones will respect it, and you'll find that you respect yourself more too. Number 6, detachment from outcomes is emotional freedom. One of the greatest gifts you can give yourself after 70 is the permission to release control, especially control over things you were never meant to manage in the first place. You are not here to orchestrate every outcome, solve everyone's problems, or bear the emotional weight of every twist and turn life brings to those around you. Let people be who they are. Let life unfold as it will. This is not resignation. It is liberation. Take Eleanor, for example. She's 84 now, but for most of her life she carried the invisible burden of her children's choices. She worried endlessly about their marriages, their jobs, their parenting. Even though her children were in their 50s, she still felt responsible for their happiness. She couldn't sleep some nights. Her blood pressure rose, her stomach constantly ached. The truth was, her love was pure, but it had become entangled in control. Eleanor's turning point came after a health scare forced her to slow down. She began to explore meditation and mindfulness. Through gentle guidance, she came across the idea that you can offer love without needing to control the outcome. It sounded impossible at first, wasn't caring the same as worrying, but over time, she began practicing detachment. She didn't stop loving her children, but she stopped believing she had to fix everything. She learned to listen without trying to change their choices. She prayed for their well-being, but let go of the idea that her worry could protect them. And something miraculous happened. Peace returned. For the first time in decades, Eleanor felt a lightness in her heart. This story isn't unique to Eleanor. It's a lesson life offers all of us if we're willing to receive it. The moment you stop controlling outcomes, you make space for emotional freedom. You see, in our younger years, we're conditioned to plan, to prepare, to push. We raise children with care, make sacrifices, and if we just try hard enough, we can shield our loved ones from pain. But after 70, life is asking something different from us. It's inviting us to surrender, not in defeat, but in trust. Detachment does not mean you stop caring. It means you care deeply, but you stop tying your peace to whether things turn out the way you hoped. You stop saying, I'll be okay if my son gets that job, or I'll feel better when my daughter leaves that relationship. Instead, you say, I am okay now. I trust life. I trust them. I trust myself. That's emotional freedom, not the absence of love, but the presence of peace within love. This shift often feels uncomfortable at first. You may feel guilty. You may fear being seen as cold or indifferent. But detachment isn't a wall, it's a window. It allows you to see others clearly, to support them without trying to rescue them, and to love without losing yourself in their storms. As you age, your energy becomes more precious. You don't have the bandwidth to carry the world anymore. And that's not a flaw, it's wisdom. Life is offering you the chance to rest, to observe, to hold space, and to breathe. So here's my heartfelt advice, one soul to another. Let go of the illusion that you are the keeper of outcomes. You are not here to manage everyone else's journey. You've already done so much. Now is the time to trust that what you've planted in others will grow. Perhaps not in the ways you imagined, but in the ways that are right for them. Trust life, trust your children, trust the flow of things. And most importantly, trust yourself. You don't have to chase peace anymore. You are standing in it the moment you let go. Breathe, you're free. Living coldly doesn't mean becoming bitter or emotionless. It means learning to value your peace over pleasing others. It's about protecting your inner world, not from love, but from people who take more than they give. Cold is not cruel, it's clear. It's choosing boundaries over burnout, solitude over shallow connection, and truth over illusion. You've spent a lifetime giving, to family, to friends, to responsibilities. But now, perhaps for the first time, you're allowed to give to yourself. Not material gifts, but the intangible treasures. Silence, serenity, and self-respect. You're allowed to slow down, to breathe, to simply be. So take a moment. What spoke to your heart today? Was it the quiet strength of saying no, without guilt? The calm power of detachment from drama? Or the liberating thought that you don't have to fix what you didn't break? Share your reflections in the comments. I'd love to hear what resonated with you most and which lesson you plan to carry forward. If this message touched your soul, please like the video, subscribe to Golden Years Balance, and pass it on to someone who's ready to reclaim their peace. Let's continue this journey, wiser, colder, and freer side by side.